Gonzaga is pursuing another five-star prospect in the 2026 recruiting class. It's not hard to see why.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com and you'll get 50% off your first year. Well, today is kind of a reset episode here on the Locked On Zags podcast. It's a good one for those who maybe only catch a couple of episodes a month to really hone in on, as we're going to give updates on Gonzaga's recruiting overall. Mostly we're going to focus on a new five-star prospect the Zags were in to watch over the weekend, but we're going to give an update on all of the Zags known recruiting targets at this moment. And in the second segment, we're going to do the same thing with transfer portal stuff. We're going to talk about Desmond Claude, who scheduled a visit over this last weekend to Alabama and then canceled said visit. We're going to talk about that, what it means, and then the rest of the known targets for Mark Few and the Zags in the transfer portal. And then we're going to close out the show talking about professional Zags. We'll talk about Chet Holmgren and Oklahoma City defeating Julian Strawther and the Denver Nuggets in Game 7. We'll talk about the NBA playoffs, the 4 teams that are remaining, 3 which feature Zags on the roster. And we'll also talk about Ryan Nembhard now that the NBA draft combine is over, how he performed, what it means for his draft stock. Jam-packed episodes, portal recruiting, NBA. Those are the offseason topics. We're going to hit a little bit of every single one of them here on Locked On Zags. We'll start with recruiting, because there was an update over the weekend. I believe this came from Sam Kaiser of League Ready on Twitter, who said that Gonzaga was one of a bunch, and I mean a bunch of teams, that was in the house to watch five-star power forward Toni Bryant in the 2026 recruiting class. Toni Bryant is a 6'9" power forward from Zephyr Hills, Florida. He is the number 10 ranked recruit in the 2026 recruiting class, according to 247 Sports. He's 12th at On3, but everywhere has him as a consensus five-star prospect, top 10, top 15 prospect in this recruiting class. He is considered the second best power forward in the 2026 class as well. He balled out at North Tampa Christian Academies, where he played his junior season. For them, he averaged 21 points, 11.8 rebounds, 6.5 blocks per game. He shot 66% from the field. He shot 43% from 3, and he led North Tampa Christian to their first ever Final Four in the Florida State High School playoffs. He has since transferred and will play at a more competitive high school for his senior season, but ultimately, there's a reason that everybody is interested in Toni Bryant. The list of schools that were watching him this weekend that was posted by Sam Kaiser, again, including Gonzaga, here's the rest of that list: Mizzou, LSU, Miami, Kansas State, Kentucky, Cal, South Florida, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, NC State, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Texas, Cincinnati, Xavier, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan, Arizona, and Purdue. Sheesh. That is an incredible list of college basketball programs that are checking out Toni Bryant. And there is obviously a difference between being in the gym and actually heavily pursuing a player, bringing them out to campus, trying to get them on a visit, all those things. Even in this case, like some of these teams sent head coaches. Mizzou, LSU, Miami sent their head coaches. The rest of the programs presumably did not send head coaches. It was an assistant coach who was on campus watching Toni Bryant. Now, we also know that Toni Bryant has taken an official visit to Missouri, to Ole Miss, and way back early in his recruiting to Boston College. He has also taken unofficial visits to Kansas, Kansas, USC, NC State, and SMU. So he's been a lot of different visits. He's been some official, some unofficial. He had basically coaches from every high major, not every high major, but every high-profile programming, Duke, Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, all in the house to watch him over the weekend. That's as blue-bloody as it gets for a high school player at this point. And then, Arizona, Purdue, Michigan. I mean, it's a tremendous list of schools. And it's not hard to see why. Toni Bryant's really, really good. He's an elite power forward who plays both sides of the ball extremely well. blocked shots data in high school, especially in non-super competitive high school leagues, is certainly worth taking with a grain of salt. Him 6.5 blocks per game does not mean that he's Chet Holmgren 2.0 or anything like that, but certainly not a bad sign that he's got that level of rim protection, or at least instincts on his side defensively. But he's just an incredibly talented, high motor player. At 6'9", he can also space the floor extremely well, shoot from three. Watching the tape on him, watching some clips, watching what we've been able to see of him, you can easily see why Gonzaga would be interested. You can also see why every other one of these programs would be interested in Bryant. But certainly for Gonzaga, he's somebody who could really play that kind of Ben Gregg, Anton Watson, more traditional power forward role for Mark Few and the Zags. He can step out, he can hit that three, he can look to make that entry pass, he can push in transition. He's going to be a good defensive player at the next level as well. So again, huge list of schools here. And with all the data we have is that Gonzaga had a coach in the building. We just don't know a ton about how serious Gonzaga is. I think they would love to land Toni Bryant, but one of the things that coaches have to make a decision on is how much time and energy do we want our assistant coaches or our head coach to invest in players that maybe aren't as likely to end up coming to Gonzaga. I don't know the case with Toni Bryant, but I do know that if Gonzaga send an assistant, they're at least interested and they at least want to talk. They at least want to have those conversations. If they ultimately feel like, well, there's way too many teams already invested here, or, hey, his priority is to stay closer to home or to play in the SEC or to make the most, or whatever it may be, the Zags could end up backing off here. But if they feel like, hey, this is a fit that really works, we talked to him, we liked his attitude, we liked, so-and-so about him, then maybe it ends up becoming a bit more serious. But one thing that is very clear, whether or not this turns into anything for Gonzaga, is the fact that Mark Few and their staff are going after the best of the best in the 2026 recruiting class. In the last few weeks, Gonzaga has been directly connected with the number one ranked small forward in the recruiting class, also the number one ranked overall player in the recruiting class in Tyrone Stokes. They have been connected to the second ranked power forward in the entire class here in Toni Bryant, who's also, again, the 10th ranked player in the class. They've also been connected to the third ranked center in the 2026 recruiting class in Sam Funches, who we spoke about on Friday's show and earlier in the week, as well as he is working on setting up his official visits to Spokane, either over Hoop Fest weekend or craziness in the kennel. So Gonzaga is literally going after the best small forward, a top 2 power forward, a top 3 center in the 2026 recruiting class. They have their heart set on getting some big names in for the 2026 recruiting class for good reason. They've also been connected to another small forward in the class, Dean Ruckert, who's a small forward from Provo, Utah, the 18th ranked small forward in the class, but also the 56th ranked player in the class. That's at On3 at 247. He's a little higher, 45th ranked player in the class, although he is also the 18th ranked small forward in that class as well. Sounds like Ruckert's leaning either Utah or Washington. So I'm not expecting him to end up in Spokane. But again, the Zags are out there looking out for some of the better players in this 2026 class. Not as much Ruckert as much as Stokes, Bryant, and Funches, who are literally all 3 top 30, top 25 prospects in that class at most of the major outlets. And since we're talking recruiting, those are the big names in 2026. 2025, the class has already got Davis Fogel, of course, from Anacortes, Washington, who's been playing at Compass Prep in Arizona, and then Parker Jefferson, who they landed a few weeks ago from Inglewood, California, originally from Texas, a 6'10" center. So we have 2 freshmen coming in, but the biggest name recently that we have heard is not a domestic high schooler in the United States, but rather an incoming freshman from overseas, and that's Mario Saint-Superi, a 6'3", 19-year-old Spanish guard who Gonzaga has been connected to for a very long time, months at this point. And there was a recent report from Eurohoops.net that Saint-Superi is coming over to the United States. And the report said that all indications are that he's going to commit to Gonzaga. From conversations I have had with people in and around the program, that is the expectation as well. As I'm recording this right now, it has not happened. It's possible that a commitment is finalized in the next hour, in the next day, in the next week. It might take a little longer than that, but it sounds like it's happening. So I think Gonzaga fans can expect the 6'3" guard from Spain, Mario Saint-Superi, to be on the roster next year. And if you want more on him, check out Friday's episode of Locked On Zags. But also when it does happen, when the commitment happens, we'll be talking all about him. We'll be having what I called a Mario party on the show if that ends up going down. So Gonzaga, once again, heavily involved in some of the best players in the 2026 recruiting class. also bringing in a couple of freshmen in 2025, and potentially bringing in a guard from Spain, a high-level player from Spain who's been playing professionally overseas in Mario Saint-Superi. So lots of excitement going on the recruiting front for Mark Few and the Zags. But now I want to talk about the transfer portal. Gonzaga's only landed one transfer in Adam Miller from Arizona State, but they have some big name targets. We're going to talk about them, including Desmond Claude, who set up a visit to Alabama and then postponed the visit. What does that mean? We'll talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever checked a bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. My wife and I, we always want to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to our finances, especially now with the soon-to-be 15-month-old in the house. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner, well, it's smoother than ever before. You can track your shared accounts and your personal accounts. You can set collective goals, and you can stay on the same page without all the added stress and hassle. So, folks, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from talking about the overall recruiting update for the Gonzaga Bulldogs at this point in the offseason to instead do the same thing with the transfer portal. We're going to talk about the latest updates with Desmond Claude, and then we're going to talk about the 3 other known targets for Mark Few and the Zags who are still available in the transfer portal. There's only 3 other ones that Gonzaga has contacted, reached out to, that we know about that have yet to commit. Then we're also going to talk about some of the players who recently committed in the transfer portal who Gonzaga had been connected to kind of get them checked off of the list. We'll start with the update on Desmond Claude. Desmond Claude, of course, the transfer from USC. Spent the first 2 years of his career at Xavier in the Big East, playing under Sean Miller. Last year, transferred to USC to play for Coach Eric Musselman and had a fantastic year with USC in the Big Ten. Averaged about 16 points, 4 assists, 3.5 rebounds for Coach Musselman. He has been connected to Gonzaga for a while, also was very strongly connected to Florida. In fact, a few weeks ago, articles were basically saying, don't even bother. Desmond Claude's going to Florida. This thing's done. It's dusted. The other schools are in the mix, but they're kind of just other names on the list. He's going to Florida. Well, it's been a couple weeks. And not only is Desmond Claude not committed to Florida, but Florida is strongly connected to Arkansas transfer Boogie Fland, who we spoke about last week on the show. I believe it was Wednesday's episode. Fland, of course, pulled his name out of the NBA draft and is now available in the transfer portal. And it sounds like Florida's the front runner again. Part of me is a bit skeptical because Florida was the front runner for Desmond Claude, but certainly if Florida is going to land Boogie Fland, they already brought in Xavier Lee from Princeton. Those 2 guys are ball-dominant lead guards. You can maybe get away with starting 2 ball-dominant lead guards. You can't get away with starting 3. Desmond Claude's not going to Florida to come off the bench. So if Florida's pursuing, but even the fact that they're pursuing heavily Boogie Fland, and the report is that he's visiting this week, so it's a heavy pursuit. If that's happening, Florida's no longer in on Desmond Claude. Like I feel pretty confident in being able to say that. Also, the fact that Desmond Claude set up a visit this weekend with Alabama is a pretty good sign that Florida is no longer pursuing Desmond Claude. However, the status of Alabama's pursuit of Desmond Claude is a little bit up in the air as well. There's a dead period starting on Wednesday in terms of visiting. So if you don't get your visit in by Wednesday, then you're going to have to wait till the end of said dead period. Claude was set to visit Alabama on Sunday night. Then a report came out from Joe Tipton on Sunday morning that visit is no longer happening. The language in the report was that the visit has been postponed. There wasn't really a lot of additional information given. So whether it was postponed for some kind of family situation with Claude or with Coach Oates or with somebody else at Alabama, it could have just been hey, we can't get this in right now because of some personal reason. Maybe it is something of, hey, the interest is no longer there, either on Claude's end, either on Alabama's end. It could just be, hey, we think the state's going to work a little bit better. Can we just move it to here type of thing? There's trying to speculate without any information. And again, that's as I'm recording this right now. That the information about this will come out very soon, and we'll have a sense of, hey, maybe this was just like a small thing that we had to move it around, and the interest is still there. Maybe it is, hey, I no longer want to go to Alabama, or Alabama no longer wants to recruit Desmond Claude, so we're just going to kind of put the pause on it. It could be that. It could be that. We really don't know at this point. Here's what I will say on Desmond Claude. Ole Miss has been heavily involved for a long time. Ole Miss has got deep pockets. Chris Beard has had a lot of success with guards. I think Ole Miss is a hard team to rule out of the mix here. At some level, BYU and Kansas are involved. It's not exactly clear how involved they are currently. BYU seems to have a pretty darn full backcourt, so it's kind of hard to imagine a fit there. Kansas could work, but again, similar type thing where they've already brought in some guards, have some freshmen coming in, so it's like, how much is that going to work? Washington is allegedly in the mix too, from what I've been hearing, but I don't know how serious that is. They, of course, already landed Wesley Yates. So it would be a reunion. Yates played at USC last year. Claude and Yates played very well together. So certainly UW would love to have the set if they could make that happen. But Gonzaga's been connected here too. And I think the fact that Florida seems out and Alabama at least is not getting him on campus, whether that means they're actually out remains to be seen. But you got to view these as at least potentially good things for Gonzaga's quest to land Desmond Claude in the transfer portal. Here are some of the other known targets. This is as of May 18th, 5:30 p.m. as I'm recording this. These are the known targets that Gonzaga has been connected to in the transfer portal who are currently not committed. Number one is Tyon Grant-Foster. And we talked about Tyon Grant-Foster on May 15th's episode of Locked On Zags, where we did a full episode comparing the pros and cons of Tyon Grant-Foster to Desmond Claude. So if you're interested in these two players, the two kind of like high scoring two guard options that Gonzaga is looking at. If you're interested in those two players, what it might look like with them in Spokane, check out that episode on the 15th. We also talked about him more broadly back on an episode on May 1st. Grant-Foster coming from Grand Canyon. Last year averaged about 15.6 boards, 2 assists, a little under 2 steals per game. He was the WAC player of the year. The previous season in 23-24, when he averaged 20 points per game, had a phenomenal season, comeback season after missing a full year with a heart condition that many doctors told him he would never play basketball again. Not only did he return to the court, he was the best player in the Western Athletic Conference. It was a really good story for him. Grant-Foster hasn't really been strongly connected to a lot of teams. I know Michigan State was in the mix a while ago, but they don't seem to be in the mix anymore, especially after landing a transfer from Miami on Sunday. We've heard Washington in the mix here as well, presumably one of Claude or Grant-Foster for them, probably not both. But we haven't seen a lot of other schools really in the mix. I've heard that Grant-Foster is interested in staying on the West Coast. That's potentially a good sign for Gonzaga in this recruitment here, but it's been pretty quiet on Tyon Grant-Foster. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just kind of hard to get a good read on his situation right now. Two other names that have been connected to Gonzaga, one a long time ago, one much more recently. We'll start with Sammy Pieces. Pieces, a French guard who played at New Hampshire last year, 6'3" guard. We talked about him more broadly on the show back on April 17th. Last year for New Hampshire, Pieces averaged about 16 points, 3.5 boards, a little under 3 assists. Not a great three-point shooter, unfortunately, under 30%, but he was the very, very high usage guard for New Hampshire. It's possible the Ryan Woolridge effect, where a player shoots much better coming into Gonzaga's offense, could be in effect for Pieces. And then last but not least, AJ Smith, transferred from Charleston. We spoke about him on May 16th's episode, the most recent episode before this one. So very recently, AJ Smith, a guard from Charleston, averaged about 11.5 points last year, about 3 boards. Also not a great three-point shooter at about 25%, but a high-volume scorer in the minutes that he was on the floor. So those are the 4 names kind of connected to Gonzaga right now in the transfer portal: Claude, Grant-Foster, Pieces, and AJ Smith. I'm sure there will be more. I'm sure we'll see more names crop up. Again, I think it depends what happens with St. Superi. It depends what happens with some of these 2026 recruits that Gonzaga is going after. If there's other international prospects they're potentially looking at that we haven't heard much about. I think there's still moves to be made. If St. Superi does commit, Gonzaga will have 11 out of 15 scholarship spots filled. I don't think there'll be any other super big additions necessarily, but there will be some other players at least added to the roster between now and the start of the season. And then we'll close out this segment here quickly. Some of the players who committed in the last week or so that Gonzaga had been connected to. We talked about Malik Thomas, the leading scorer in the WCC last year from San Francisco, who was committed to Virginia in the transfer portal. Duke Miles, a target, a sharpshooter from Oklahoma, who committed to Virginia, then decommitted, then committed to A&M, then decommitted. He has finally committed again to Vanderbilt. And then Jacob Darr was a target for Gonzaga for a while, a 6'7", good scoring wing from Rice. He is committed to Seton Hall. And then I'll toss Baba Miller on here. We talked about Baba Miller. There was never a direct connection this offseason for Gonzaga and Baba Miller, but Gonzaga offered Miller out of high school. He played at Florida State, so there's a connection with RJ Barsh. Baba Miller has committed now to Wes Miller and the Cincinnati Bearcats in the Big 12. That wraps up our recruiting update. That wraps up our transfer portal update. Now we're going to close out the show talking about the NBA. Chet Holmgren helped lead Oklahoma City to the Western Conference Finals, setting up a 75% chance that a Zag will earn a ring this season. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. All right, folks. Segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show, talking about Game 7 between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference semifinals on Sunday afternoon. The Thunder, the 1 seed in the Western Conference, defeats the 4-seeded Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic goes down, 125-93 the final score. This thing was not even close. Oklahoma City dominated pretty much from the start in this one, and Chet Holmgren was a big part of it. 13 points for him, 11 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block. Played 28 minutes. Was 4 of 6 on his 2-point attempts. He did go 0 of 3 from 3. Hasn't really shot it well from beyond the arc in the playoffs. He shot it well in the regular season, but that outside shot hasn't been a big weapon for him yet in the playoffs. Oklahoma City fans will certainly hope that he can find that in the Western Conference Finals and or the NBA Finals if they end up making it there. But he's also 5 of 6 from the free throw line, which helped him get to that double-double numbers. Chet was plus 34. In this game, from a plus-minus perspective. 1 game plus-minus data is not doesn't give you a whole lot of information other than that specific game. But Chet was plus 34, and that was also 3rd on his team, which is kind of insane. I think a good or 4th on the team, actually, a good indication of how dominant Oklahoma City was in this game. And Chet, his value to this team was not just in getting the double-double, but he was tasked with defending Nikola Jokic, not the entire game, but at times. And Jokic didn't have a great game. And it's funny because I'm going to read you his stat line, 20 points, 9 boards, 7 assists. That doesn't sound like a bad game, but for Jokic, that's kind of a bad game. He was only 5 of 9 from the field. Efficient, yes. The best player in the world has got to be taking more than 9 shots in an elimination game. Like, the fact that he was unable to get off more than 9 shots, he got a lot of his points from the free throw line. So he was, 9 field goal attempts is a tiny bit misleading, but ultimately he needs to do more, and he was not able to do so. And Chet was part of the reason that he was unable to do more in this game. Denver could have also used another Julian Strawther game. It was labeled the Julian Strawther game in Game 6 when he went crazy and went on an 8-0 run in the 3rd quarter and helped the Nuggets win that game. And unfortunately, it kind of ends as the Julian Strawther game because it didn't end up being the Julian Strawther series because he was fine in this game. He had 6 points off the bench. He had 6 points, 3 boards, and a steal. He also had 3 turnovers in 18 minutes per game. He was 3 of 6 on 2-point attempts, hence all 6 of his points, but he was 0 of 2 from the 3-point line. He was minus 10 on the game, which was actually the 3rd best mark on the team. The only players who were better than him in this game were Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr., the team's 2 starting forwards, who I think were minus 8 and minus 9, and then Strawther was minus 10. So again, 1 game sample doesn't necessarily tell you a whole lot. He might have just been on the floor with the right teammates at the right time, but at least not a bad sign for Julian Strawther that according to that metric, he was far from the worst player on the floor. In fact, was one of the better players on the floor for his Denver team. But his season ends with a remarkable Game 6 performance, but that is it for Julian Strawther. Meanwhile, Chet and Oklahoma City will face Minnesota, the Timberwolves, the 6th seed in the Western Conference. That series starting on Tuesday, the Western Conference Finals at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. The game will be on ESPN. You want to watch Chet Holmgren versus Rudy Gobert? It's going to be a lot of fun on Tuesday night. Meanwhile, Andrew Nembhard and the Indiana Pacers take on the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. That series begins on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Very quick turnaround for the Thunder to have to play on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Pacers and the Knicks have both been done a little bit longer, and they get a little bit longer break. That game will be on TNT on Wednesday. Because Anton Watson is on the Knicks roster, he is not on their active roster, as in he's not going to be in a playoff game unless they change their roster, which I believe you can do between series, but you cannot do between games of a series, barring an injury, I think is the rules. But typically players who are on two-way contracts who played for that team during the regular season will get a ring if the team wins a championship. My understanding is that it is up to the team. The Knicks do not have to give Anton Watson a ring, but they do not have to, but they can. They are allowed to. From what I understand from reading about previous teams, most of the time the teams give a ring to players who played for them that season, regardless of whether they were on the active roster during the actual championship. I say all that to say this. There is a 75% chance that a Gonzaga player will earn a ring at the end of the NBA season. Whether it is the Oklahoma City Thunder and Chet Holmgren, whether it is the Indiana Pacers and Andrew Nembhard, whether it is the New York Knicks and Anton Watson. There are no NBA players on the Minnesota Timberwolves. So even though Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren, who of course desperately wants to beat Minnesota, even though they're from Minnesota, shout out Sam Dower from Minnesota as well. We are anti-Timberwolves in this house, at least. We're rooting for the other teams. I know many of you have serious aversions to rooting for the Oklahoma City Thunder because of the Sonics. I get that. Root for Indiana, if that's the case, or root for New York. Either one. Zags getting a ring if 3 of these 4 teams win the championship. That's what we're rooting for to happen this season. All right, closing out the show, giving an update on the NBA Draft Combine and Ryan Nembhard's performance. He has been labeled one of the many winners by most media outlets. Everybody who covers the draft has done some NBA Draft Combine winners and losers. Here are the players who boosted their stock, who are the players who lowered their stock after the Combine. Ryan Nembhard is pretty much on every list as a riser because he wasn't even supposed to be at the NBA Draft Combine. He was at the G League Elite Camp, was one of 5 players invited from the elite camp to the Combine alongside Mackenzie Mbako, Tamar Bates from Missouri, Yannick Niederhauser from Penn State, and then there was an international player, Lars Ulrich, were the 5 players invited. And Nembhard performed extremely well at the actual Combine as well. He had 13 points and 8 assists in the first scrimmage game. I think that was just with 1 turnover. Second game, he just had 6 points and 5 assists and 2 turnovers. But he did most of that very early in the game. Like I think he had all 6 of his points and 4 of his 5 assists in the first 5 minutes, and then kind of just was in and out of the lineup, didn't play a ton the rest of the scrimmage again. These scrimmages are tough to judge guys too much because every player has to play like 15 to 20 minutes in these games. They don't have to, but if I got invited to the Combine and the coach didn't play me, I'd be pretty pissed. So like they kind of try to give everybody a fair, even amount of minutes. But Nembhard looked great. He looked great on the floor. He looked smooth, effortless. Sean Farnham was one of the broadcasters, so he was, of course, gassing him up at every chance that he got. We love you, Sean. We love supporting the WCC and giving us some good talk about Nembhard during the event. Some of the other stats from Nembhard in the measurements and the testing and stuff like that, we'll just kind of go through it quickly. He measured at 5'11" without shoes, which is exactly what we would have thought. The shoes on average add about 1.2 inches. Nembhard was listed at 6 foot. Would have loved for him to measure at 6 foot without shoes, but it is what it is. He's the second shortest player at the Combine outside of Alabama's Mark Sears. His wingspan, 6 foot 2.25, also the second shortest at the Combine, also only ahead of Mark Sears. His weight was 175.8. The 4th lightest. The 3 players that he was heavier than were all true freshmen last year, so I think that they just hadn't had as much time to fill out muscularly. That was LeBaron Philon, Boogie Fland, and Tahad Pettiford. So Nembhard's one of the smallest players. This isn't news. This isn't shocking. I think that you would have hoped that maybe the testing measurements would have been a little bit better, but his wingspan's 4.25 inches longer than his height. That's pretty good. It's just still pretty small because he's not a big guy. His testing numbers were okay. We never really expected Nembhard to blow people out of the water with his like shuttle run or vertical leap or anything like that, but he was fine. His shuttle run was 2.88 seconds. That was 13th, so right in the middle of the pack, ahead of Hunter Salas, ahead of Tahad Pettiford, Igor Demine, guys like that. His max vert was 32.5 inches, tied with Rasheer Fleming, tied with LeBaron Philon and Eric Dixon, also ahead of Igor Demine, also ahead of Alex Tui, former Gonzaga recruit, PJ Haggerty, Cam Jones, a couple others as well. But where Nembhard really shined was the shooting drills. He was tied for fourth in off-dribble shooting behind Jace Richardson, Will Riley, and Mark Sears. He was spot-up shooting. He was right in the middle of the pack with the three-point shooting. The star drill, 19 out of 25 is what he shot in the star drill. That was top in the entire event, tied with Shamar Bates from Missouri. So those two guys were the only players who put up 19 out of 25. That means he was ahead of known shooters Kobe Bryant, Cooper Flagg, Liam McNeely, Trey Johnson, Chaz Lanier, Walter Clayton, everybody else in that event. Ryan Nembhard shot it better than them. This is what he needed to do. It is so critical that Ryan Nembhard proved, hey, I'm not just a 6-foot point guard who's a good passer. I can also shoot the rock. I don't know how much it helps him, but if he shot poorly, it is curtains. I mean, it would have crushed any chances he had of getting drafted. The fact that he shot it not only well, but elite while playing well in the scrimmages, that is what he needed to do to keep himself in the conversation as a potential second-round pick in the upcoming NBA draft. Still a tough path. So a tough path for a player who measured under 6 foot without shoes on, for a player who's a senior. The age does matter. Those other younger guards we talked about are likely to go higher than Nembhard in the draft if they stay in the draft because of the upside that they are perceived to have that Ryan is not perceived to have because of his age. Now, I don't know how much I agree with that. Andrew Nembhard was considered a safe, high floor pick without a ton of upside when the Pacers selected him. He's been way better than advertised, because when you're talking about an older draft prospect, you're still talking about a freaking 22-year-old. Like, they're not old. Maybe that's me getting older in my age, and now I think of that as being super young. But the 22-year-old prospects are still young. They still got time to change and develop. And I think that ignoring Ryan Nembhard, now I think, again, the height he's not going to get taller. Like, it's fair to be concerned about that, but I don't think the age should be held against him. And I think the fact that his brother has shown more NBA capability than people thought he had, being drafted as a senior out of Gonzaga, will help Ryan's perceived draft stock as well. Will it help enough for him to get selected? That kind of depends on how he does in some of these individual workouts. He reported on Friday that he's only had one team workout so far, and that was with the Atlanta Hawks. He's got about a week, a little over a week, about 10 days before he's got about a month until those individual workouts end. I think it's like June 15th. So he's got plenty of time to go out, work out with teams, do well in those events, and potentially get himself selected in the second round. If so, he would become the fifth. There'd be 5 years in a row that a Gonzaga player has been drafted in the NBA draft. Last year was Anton Watson. 2 years ago was Julian Strawther. 2 years before that, it was Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nembhard. Hey, weird. We just talked about all four of those guys as they're all still, except for Strawther, contenders to get a ring this year. And then the year before that, in 2021, it was Jalen Suggs, Corey Kispert, and Philip Petrusev. We'll see if Nembhard can make it 5 years in a row. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be live on YouTube Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. That is the plan as of now on the show. I'll keep you updated on social media and in the Locked On Zags Discord channel as well. Should be a really fun week, keeping you up to date on the transfer portal, keeping you up to date on the Mario Saint-Superi sweepstakes as the Zags are looking to bring him out to Spokane. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on with Ryan Nembhard and other recruits as well. Thanks again for listening, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And as always, go Zags.